Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. This is Ryan Thomas. I have Nick Bisciotti here with me from Timlin. Welcome back to the second edition of Timlin Talks. Started as a extremely casual, maybe too casual way to just shoot the breeze over some latest Microsoft goings on and a way to maybe get some of the community and anybody who wants to ask some questions involved, and really just designed to get a couple people, maybe more, in a virtual room, and just chat about some of the latest stuff. So if anybody is listening and wants to ask questions, please throw some comments up in the chat window, and they'll get curated, and if appropriate, we'll discuss them. Anything that you want to know offline, look us up on LinkedIn, post some questions. I think that we have a Microsoft Forms link out there. Microsoft Forms, yay! Good tool, and we'll try to get to them. So again, really meant to be not a webinar, not some formal presentation, just a couple people talking and really just sort of get a casual interface to the kind of stuff that we live and breathe every day. So I welcome my buddy Nick here today, who's extremely knowledgeable, and we have a few kind of topics lined up. Say hi, Nick.
Hey, Ryan.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nick's a very busy man, so I'm excited to have his time today, and I thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to diving in. Anything you want to say at the onset, Nick, or should we pick a topic and go?
I think we could just roll with it.
Okay. All right. So Nick's our dude on the ground at a lot of our customers, and does an excellent job sort of helping them, define their strategy and roadmap, and really make the best use out of these tools. He has some unique skills, like Liam Neeson from Taken, except not killing people, I hope. And we greatly value those skills. So I do value his opinion quite a bit, and I would hope that the community base does as well. One of the first topics at hand is this Microsoft throwing out to the world that we're getting rid of SharePoint 2010 and 2013 workflows. For everybody that's out there in SharePoint Online or hasn't seen SharePoint 2010 for 10 years or whatever, they probably think, oh, it's no big deal, right? Nick, I don't have any of those. Why would I have any of those? What do you think? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think SharePoint 2010 workflows are everywhere. So the Office 365, they're on-prem. So we got customers running on-prem SharePoint 2010 still. So we have those workflows there. We have them in SharePoint 2013 and 2016 because the later platforms had there were challenges implementing those platforms, right? So people just stuck with what was easy. And now the clock's ticking. What is it? April 13th, 2021 is that? I think that's the extended support date.
With the drop dead date, because I heard August they're going to start shutting them down, right?
August starts shutting down, yeah.
Yep. So for SharePoint Online only, obviously, because you can't really shut down people's on-prem because it's already in there installed. So you could certainly continue to build them on-prem, but would you recommend that?
Oh, in terms of the I follow. In terms of the workflow is August, and then the 2010 platform is April. So yeah, rebuilding the workflows. Yeah, I think inventorying them first is probably going to be a challenge that has to be looked at. Because really, you have to look through the workflows and see what's out there, see who the owners are. There's probably people that don't even, they may be gone. So that's going to be a long exercise, I think, for a lot of companies.
Yep. And there's a script that Microsoft provided, right, that people can run and kind of give them some knowledge.
That's right.
Yep. So that's a free script. It's available. It's there's already some good information out there that you can find on the web. Also, you can reach out to us if you have any questions. But there's a script that Microsoft gives you. You can at least run it against your environment. I think it's important to note that you might say I'm on SharePoint Online, and even if you started there, even if you never came from another environment, there is a possibility you have these workflows because SharePoint Designer has been around for a long time. Used to be obviously the tool of choice a while ago, and that was the workflows that you created from them. And you can put them in SharePoint Online. You can put them in any version of SharePoint starting in 2010, as far as these workflows specifically. If you've done any migrations or upgrades, they may have gotten shoved over into the SharePoint Online. So don't just assume that you don't have them, it's probably worth it to run the check and make sure and give yourself a little bit of breathing room to maybe consider upgrading. And Nick, what's some of the the technologies of choice to convert these not to convert, not a conversion tool, but what new tools would you use in lieu of the classic 2010 workflows?
Well, I think with workflows, we're looking at a lot of task automation, and we're looking at possibly forms, notifications. So I think the clear go-to would be the Power Platform, right? Power Automate would be a candidate. Some third-party products, Microsoft Forms, Power Apps, Power Automate Flow. I think those would be a lot of the common the targets on a conversion. Maybe SharePoint 2013 workflow.
What about InfoPath? You recommend InfoPath?
I don't think so. Do you?
No, I'm just messing with you. No way. Unless you just want to convert those again in a couple of years.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, cool.
But Ryan, the interesting point this brings up, like bigger picture, is centralization of development versus decentralization, right? So that's all the citizen developer conversation, and I think where IT sort of lost track of a lot of this was with the enablement of the citizen developer, and so I think it brings back, and it has to be a new balance there, right? And because now we're going to learn very quickly about what happens when we don't have any IT involvement and we just enable the power users across the organization. Now we see the back end costs and consequences of a lot of that. And if we're aware of that and we learn from that, then when we go to Office 365, we can plan for that from the beginning, as opposed to repeating it. That's the takeaway that I'm really seeing. Because who's going to burden the costs of the workflow corrections or rewrites? A lot of it's going to fall on IT. Migrations, a lot of that's going to fall on IT. But yeah, IT wasn't really responsible for necessarily creating that problem. They allowed it to happen, but I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. So, as I told you all, Nick is a strategist. So, of course, he just touched on something really important, which is, that kind of role of centralization versus decentralization. And that was back in the day, at least, and it's still going on. That was always one of the issues when I was a consultant is, does IT centralize the services and the resources to provide the business for development? I mean, various projects, right? Sometimes companies would have a liaison between IT and the business. Sometimes the business would have to budget and hire their own people. And I'm not going to put you on the spot, Nick, but I would like to sort of at least get your opinion on, what do you see working best these days? And I know every organization is different. Your mileage may vary. Put the disclaimers at the bottom. Nobody's holding you to it. But do you still think that the sort of that core service model, like IT, should be that driver? Because right now, I see your point that IT doesn't know about any of these workflows, and the workflows are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole bunch of other stuff out there too that if they don't know it exists, but yet they're going to be the ones that are going to have to fix it 2, 3, 4 years down the road. We sort of call that technical debt in the consulting or technology world. I just sort of get your opinion on what you see working best. And while I give you a second to think about that, I will put a shout out to our audience and ask them, please, if you're listening, ask some questions. Even if you're listening in the future, and this is a recorded session, ask some questions because we're going to listen to them all, take them all, and get them back into another session. And if you are in the future, could you tell me what the winning lottery numbers are? Thank you very much. Okay, Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I think I see IT facing a lot of pressure. Like the technologies are meant to enable everybody in the organization, right? And IT is kind of balancing between, how much involved do we get? Do we just provide the technology and then walk away and monitor things and audit things, or do we actually provide best practices on how to use the technology and find patterns? I think what we see is that when IT provides some consultative services in its model, then it's going to reduce support on the other end. It's going to reduce cost on the other end. For example, when you spin up a new SharePoint site or a new Microsoft team, they're vanilla, right? They don't have a structure. They don't have a SharePoint site has a shared document library, and it has a couple web parts. But if you run with that, it doesn't have any security configurations out of box that are really meaningful. Somebody has to know how to template these things and how to adapt them to the patterns that are being used, like whether the SharePoint site is going to be used on a project or to manage a program information or to manage a business process, right? And all of these have different considerations. Like some have guest access, some don't. Some have whitelisted domains, some don't. Some allow member sharing of files. Some only allow owners. There's different requirements. So, and then this design and the structure. Why give something vanilla to the end user and then expect them to, take the rest on themselves, right? So I think when it comes to workflow, I think if you take a risk-based approach to it and you look at what bad things could happen, I think there's a lot of bad things that can happen by just giving the end user community a bunch of technology without any guidance. And it's also it's just not efficient. Like, IT is such a big opportunity to bring the end user, the power user, to a good starting point, at least train them, give them patterns and examples and guidelines so that they're using these technologies in a way where they're managing content or they're managing, uniqueness for themselves, but they're not actually reinventing or rediscovering every single time they need something new.
Got it. Hey, you got to see my family just walk in while we're live streaming. Awesome. Welcome home, family. This is the world of COVID. Love it. Had to happen. But thanks, Nick. I get it. It's and I might want to circle back to this if we have some time at the end about your IT services definition, because this is probably right in the heart of that, right? I can say that where I've seen it work best is when it's kind of there's a dual role. In that you're right. You can't just have, hey, business people, go do whatever you want and you're on your own. And you're free to do whatever you want, so to speak. And it can't all just be everything funneled through IT. I see both of those being chaotic and or stifling, but where IT helps direct, guide, and understand what's occurring, but lets the business kind of get some things done with, let's call it a little oversight. Let's call it oversight. That's a good engagement management, whatever word you want to use. But that way they're aware of it. They're aware of the change, and the people doing that work maybe have to adhere to some change management rules, even if they're in a business unit or hired by a business unit as a consultant. That's where I've seen it be effective. Of course, it can get a little contentious. Don't do this. Yes, do that. But at least as far as the realm or the spectrum, I've seen that be where you get the most done while still being fairly protective of your environment, understanding what's going on. And obviously size of the company and culture makes a difference too, but those are really important topics. So maybe we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about, which I know is near and dear to your heart, is, we talked about how workflows can get into your environment. And one of those is by means of a migration. And back in the SharePoint early days, it seemed like half of the business we had was doing some type of migration or upgrade. I'm just sort of curious what you're seeing in the world today in migrations, either tools, technologies, maybe special ways of getting things done. Just sort of curious if there's anything that you're coming across that you find interesting or worth kind of sharing with the community.
With regards to migrations and workflows, I think the disappointing thing for me is that I continuously run into the lift and shift ask, right? So we have an on-prem environment. We want to lift and shift our SharePoint sites to Office 365. And a lot is being ignored there, just from, an opportunity to define the environment in Office 365, that's being bypassed. But if you look at the individual site that's being migrated one at a time or at a micro level, just look at one site, and you approach that with lift and shift, you're ignoring an opportunity to modernize it or to look for patterns or to correct things that are wrong, or possibly just not even bother with migrating it, right? We could maybe archive it, or we can do a streamlined migration, an online archive of some kind, content only. So I think having really good intelligence and data about the environment is really important to make decisions about how to migrate. And I still see a lot of that being ignored or minimized, unfortunately. So what happens is we end up getting SharePoint 2010 workflows carry over to a migration, and now look, we have to deal with it. It's on someone else's timeline, not our own timeline.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad you kind of brought that particular problem up, because it's. I would say it may be the number one. Not maybe not issue. I don't. Maybe not issue isn't the right word, but sort of request / discussion point in the engagements we have, which is, hey, we're migrating some file shares, or we're migrating from on-prem, or we're migrating from something to another, and what we want to tell them, and what we do tell them is, okay, let's do an analysis on the current set of content. Let's figure out what those work streams look like, and let's figure out how they would be better or more appropriately suited in the new environment. Let's call it the cloud, Microsoft 365, SharePoint Online, Teams, all the various tools, right? You matrix it out to where it should belong. And then what happens is they immediately start to see that, oh, well, that's going to take time, and time is money, and consulting time is money, and internal time is money. We don't want to do that. We don't have to do that. We're just going to grab the whole thing and move it from one place to another. And I'm trying to think of like the best analogy for that would be really obnoxious in like your own life. And it's almost like every time you move houses, if think about when you had your very first apartment or whatever, you just took everything with you next time. I mean, I remember when I did not spend enough time in one of my house moves, and I paid the guy to move bags of trash because I couldn't leave the bags of trash.
I remember that story. You told me that story.
Exactly. Yeah. I did. I paid a mover to move bags of trash from one house to another. And in this particular case, the analogy would be, and I'd still have those bags of trash today sitting in my garage, stinking, taking up space. And I can imagine if you didn't like redesign your house, you didn't redesign furniture, you didn't kind of fit your lifestyle or what you have in your house to where you're living right now, and you just kept all your old junk. You'd have stacks of it, right? You'd be like a hoarder. And I don't know, I can't think of a better analogy than that off the top of my head, but that's kind of what it is, right? When you lift and shift, you're just dragging all that old garbage with you, and you're doing it the old garbage way. And one of the reasons why if you're just going to do it the old way, why bother migrating? It's just to make sure you have support. No, actually take advantage of some of the new tools, clean out some of the dead wood, have some archive strategies, all the stuff you're talking about. You don't have to do it all at once. I think that's what scares people. And that's the message I think I'd like to get across today is chunk it out, piece it out a little bit, pick some of pick a workload, pick a work stream, pick a low hanging fruit, pick something that's important to you, and start there and start to make progress. But just commit to making progress. It's like going to the gym, right? I can't go get in shape tomorrow, right? But if I go a little bit every day, which I haven't been obviously, but if I did, things would be going better for me. And that's what we try to convince people to do. So I don't know if you have any comments about that or not, but that's how I feel.
No, I agree. I mean, I wish organizations would take a continuous approach to migration and modernization, and just realize that it does require constantly moving and adapting. And this idea that resource constraints are a reason not to take that approach, it doesn't hold up, because you bring garbage over, you're going to have to address it later. So you're just, again, if you're charging to that technical debt credit card every single time you do that, and then you're going to be put in a position where now you have a big expensive project that you didn't plan for that's going to come up because the technology is going to go into life, like what's happening now, versus, and I think it falls back to on leadership in the organizations to just acknowledge this as well and accept this continuous mindset of constantly evolving, constantly modernizing, and allowing the resources to be allocated to support that. I think IT needs to do a better job providing the full cost picture to their leaderships. I think leadership gets a small picture of cost based on a narrow scope of vision. and they don't see the whole picture. I think if they have the full story, they'd be a little bit more open.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. And I think that the investment in the tools will pay dividends, and the increase in efficiency and productivity and, I would say speed to market or speed to business, it will pay off over time. And the opposite is also true too. The more you're mired in that technical debt, it's like kind of walk through molasses to try to get some things done. So I'm with you. All right. We'll move on to another topic. The topic we'll probably talk about every time. Before I do that, I just, again, want another shout out for anybody joining late or viewing this after the fact. Please ask some questions. We will get them. We will either try to answer them now or in a future episode. Even if you just want to, send it to us offline. Hey, I'd like to hear you guys talk about XYZ in the next Timlin Talks. That allow me to or us to get the right people in the virtual room and talk shop. With that, so Teams, Microsoft Teams. From what I'm seeing, and what I'm going to ask you is, what's kind of the cool stuff you're seeing people using it for? Maybe some common uses. I should never be amazed at how I think we assume a lot of things because we live and breathe this stuff every day, that we think that everybody knows how this all works. I mean, I only know half the stuff these days. I'm not as technical as I used to be. And some people just don't know anything about it. And I assume that when I'm talking to them. So maybe hearing some cool things people are doing with Teams could be pretty useful. Maybe some new features that, if you care about them, if you looked at them. But it appears to me that it's the feature with the most amount, the product with the most amount of new features being released at the rapid pace. And I don't think that's just because of COVID. I think that was in Microsoft's roadmap already, obviously, because they can't just build this stuff on the fly. Which means that what that leads me to believe as a Microsoft kind of, I would say lifer, is that's their product of choice. That's where they're investing their money. That's where we should expect to see a lot of core functionality, at least it's like a spoke or a hub of service start to be. I was just sort of curious what your thoughts are on it and what you're seeing out there.
I mean, from a Teams implementation perspective, I think obviously the work hub concept and work from home with the communication aspects of Teams. But from collaboration, I think it's a great project management tool. It's a great tool to organize information that's going to be persistent and also provide the conversation. So I see a lot of like PMOs or project groups. Like, we have a few different customers that I'm thinking of that have very repetitive, consistent project structures and processes that are benefiting from Teams and being able to even template Teams and automate provisioning of Teams based on their own unique design. And I like how we can pull the tools together. They're not even restricted to Microsoft. We can bring in Box or Ignite or ShareFile or all these cloud storage tools that really might even work better than Microsoft for file transfer, right? In some cases. And then we can complete the picture with Power BI and bring in reporting, and we can store our data in back-end systems, or we can store our data in SharePoint sites and lists and things. But I think what I'm really most interested in with Teams upcoming is the DataFlex Pro with the new common data service, the data storage service, the premium one I'm referring to. So providing like relational data storage for apps that can plug into Teams. And then the lightweight DataFlex that is free for Teams apps. And I'm looking forward to that. The one thing that I think it's still a big question. In our older development models, there was opportunity to develop applications and package them, and even sell them and retail them, and build up a whole bunch of like IP and go to market. And it was a very, like, if you can remember the big conferences, going around booth to booth and just seeing all the interesting applications that companies developed. The one thing that I'm still missing on Teams, though, is the ability to do something like that within Teams. I guess that's the entrepreneurial interest of mine, is curious about that. But from an enterprise, I think Teams will be a good platform for a while with development. And I think the DataFlex Pro data services is going to fill a big gap that we have right now with relational data, because SharePoint lists just don't perform well and they're flat, and it's a lot of work to get the relationships to be meaningful. And we're doing workarounds with Microsoft Forms or Power Apps or SPFX, and it's just not the same as building a traditional app with all the performance and the flexibility.
Totally.
So I think,
I'm with you. Yeah, some lightweight relational database capabilities that live somewhere between the classic SQL and the SharePoint list that something like Power BI could tap into. It would be. It's just. I think you're right. That's a big missing hole. So I'm totally with you. And maybe you're onto something with your product idea. I mean, it's not having a marketplace, right, for third-party apps is not the same as the virtual or the trade show, right? The classic trade show where you're sort of consumed. You're a captive audience. You walk down the aisles. You look at stuff. You talk to people. Maybe you're onto a new idea, the virtual trade show, where you can really visit these things and there can be vendors and booths and you can sort of walk down and talk to people, but all from the privacy of your own home. And that's probably not a bad idea. So that's definitely a topic for a day. And I know we're running out of time. Try to keep it to 30 minutes. And believe it or not, I do have a meeting after this. But I did want to at least maybe give Nick to talk for a minute or two, and could certainly be a topic for another day on detail, especially if anybody's interested and wants to subscribe to the channel, ask questions, or has further interest in this. But Nick gave a compelling presentation at a SharePoint Saturday recently, all online, of course, and it had a lot to do with IT service definition. So at the very least, Nick, will you just give it a pitch for what IT service definition is, and maybe a quick intro, and then we'll kind of wrap up, and maybe we can do a deeper dive sometime later.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I think it would be good to have a talk about that topic in general. The idea of IT services and IT defining its services it's a strategic topic. It's not a technical topic. But really what we ask you to do when we talk you through this is really to think from many different perspectives, from IT, from end user consumer, from a learning experience, from resource requirements, from security and compliance, all the way around the circle. And think about, what is IT offering the rest of the organization as a service, not in terms of technology, but in terms of business capability. So for example, an intranet or file sharing or knowledge management or project management tools. These are all generic IT services. A project management tool may be a combination of Teams and Project Online and Power App, Power BI with Power Automate. It might be a mashup of many different technologies, but the service is something that needs to be defined. And too often we refer to these things in our organization by the technology, and it's ambiguous, and it causes us to get confused and create guidelines that don't make sense, and it causes people to get frustrated with each other, and there's a whole bunch of challenges. So yeah, it would be good, Ryan, if we could talk about that sometime, where we could dive into it. And
yeah, I would love to. So when you say, just to make sure I understand and everybody understands what you're saying, the I think it's clear to me. So a service is not the same as a technology. But if I'm giving you Project Online, I'm not giving you a service. I'm giving you a technology. So you would further define that service into like how it solves a business problem, is what you're saying, I think. But what about like an intranet? Is an intranet a technology, or is that a service?
Well, that's a good question. So in each of these services, we map them out to solutions. So a solution is a specific answer for a use case within the service, which is a category of capabilities. So like, for example, file sharing would encompass external file sharing, internal file sharing, transferring file, things like this, right? Intranet is basically what it is it's tools to communicate from small audiences to the broader audience through a publishing mechanism, right? A portal, it's the search engine. It's all these capabilities combined to provide what we call an intranet. I refer to intranet as an IT service, and then I refer to specific, like for example, a communication site for a department might be a solution within that service, or a custom search portal for knowledge might be a particular solution.
Good. Yeah,
So,
I'm with you. I'm with you. And I think one of the reasons why Microsoft went away from selling SKUs is because they didn't want to just be peddling technology. They wanted to be peddling solutions, right?
Mhm.
And I think a service wrapped around that is a really good way to look at it, which is it's a set of solutions to really specific problems that the business needs, not just peddling SKUs. So I definitely, it's a topic I'd like to explore. I know you've done it already, and certainly like to pick your brain a little bit for the benefit of the public. All right, and I know we got to go. I'm already 3 minutes late to my meeting, but this was well worth it. As a wrap, I want to thank Nick. Thank you. Really appreciate it. But Nick's very busy, and I really like that he took his time today, and hopefully he enjoyed it and the audience enjoyed it. Whoever sees it now or later, please subscribe to the channel, ask questions, send us emails. This is not some veiled sales pitch. Go ahead and ask questions. We'd love to kind of interact with the community, and we'll schedule one in for 3 or 4 more weeks, and we'll see what topics we come up with then. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks,
great
Ryan.
time, man.
Don't
move
trash around from house to house.
Don't move trash around. Don't pay somebody to move trash around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially that. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Be good. Take care.